really, I think there's what you might call a global pandemic of depression, anxiety, addictions, the lasting effects of interpersonal trauma. We've been speaking over lunch about some of the things you're researching here, of OCD, of opioid addictions, lots of different types of suffering for which Western medicine, and psychiatry in particular, struggles to address, particularly to innovate in that field in recent times. Psychedelics, I don't need to tell you, but psychedelics like ayahuasca seem in many cases to help. But working out how they help, for who, in what circumstances, that remains at the cutting edge of research that you're all doing and I'm doing as well. So the problem is that research in psychedelics is difficult precisely because of the intensive, broad-ranging, what I just call wild effects of the acute psychedelic experience. Traditional research methods, including the gold standard of placebo-controlled trial, with its need for effective blinding, are often thwarted. It's a phenomenal challenge. Today, I'll present to you one response to that challenge. I'll introduce interpretative phenomenological analysis as a well-regarded, time-tested, rigorous, structured methodology for researching human experiences. I'll explain what I've done in my study so far, so I'm midway through my PhD, and share with you, actually for the first time ever, you're the first group I'm sharing this with, my draft findings, where I'm up to in my data analysis. I'll try to demonstrate what's unique about IPA, even within qualitative approaches, and something of the distinctive demands that IPA places on the researcher. So I'm Adam Knowles, as you heard. I'm a supervisee. I sometimes prefer to call myself an apprentice of Jonathan Smith, who was the founder of Interpretative Phenomenological Analysis. I'm at Birkbeck, which is where he is. He's my supervisor. I'm also a psychotherapist in private practice. I'm an existential psychotherapist. I can get into that if you want. I'm a lecturer in psychotherapy and counselling at Regent's College, Regent's University now. And I've drunk a lot of ayahuasca, perhaps about 50 times. So in a sense, this even today is part of my psychedelic journey. It's a deeply, maybe it is, I know that it is for many of you, a deeply personal endeavour, as well as trying to offer something that's more objective and more general, and an offering that can be more generalised, let's say. The research is in collaboration with the King's College on Science and the Ayahuasca Foundation. I'll get into the talk now. If you want to ask a question, please do. You want to raise a hand, and if there's something that maybe I've missed or overlooked, or you have a burning question, please do interject. I welcome that and welcome a conversation. Otherwise, I'll talk for, is it okay, James? I'll talk for about 20 minutes from here at the time?
Yeah.
Quarter two? Yeah, and then go into questions and have more of a free-ranging discussion amongst all of us. I did invite that dialogue, including the people online. Don't know how I'm going to do that. Yeah. Maybe. But yeah, I'll keep my responses brief, and there'll be time for questions at the end. So, come with me on a journey to deepest, darkest Peru. Here's Iquitos. Are you familiar with Iquitos? Anybody been there? Nope. So I've drunk ayahuasca in Costa Rica as well, but I went via Lima to Iquitos. Iquitos is in the middle of the jungle. Tried to show here's the Ayahuasca Foundation where I did my study. So my research had, so this is about, I think in a sense it's about as far from the lab as you can get. It's what you might call a naturalistic study. It's in the field, and it's about as in the field as it's possible to get. 2 weeks in the jungle, there are no roads. There's no roads into Iquitos. There's no roads into the Ayahuasca Foundation. You can only get to Iquitos by plane or boat. You can only get to the Ayahuasca Foundation by boat. It's about a 3-hour boat journey from the centre of Iquitos. And this is all solar power, compost toilets. It's a very isolated, purposefully isolated. There's no Wi-Fi, no calling home, a lot of the kind of comforts that you might expect in a Western setting are deliberately removed. There's an aesthetic of less, I would say. There's a very strict diet, including that's completely comprehensive. You can only eat or drink what they offer you, which is a very dialed down and no salt, no coffee, no stimulating substances. And generally, the ayahuasca retreats expect participants or demand that participants, for a period of weeks before they come, practice a dieta, a very strict cleansing of the body, a purging of the body, before you even sit down to take the ayahuasca. We eat, sleep, breathe, vomit, everything together for 2 weeks. And I did that with one group of participants. So my study included, there were 10 participants, 8 of them opted into my study, and then I studied those 8, and I studied them at 3 time points. I'll tell you more about the structure of my method in a minute, but that's just a setup. We're in Peru. There's me waving. This is the boat that goes to the Ayahuasca Foundation. Here's the Ayahuasca Foundation solar panels. It's a beautiful centre. It was set up by an ex-heroin addict, so maybe this relates to some of the opioid addiction stuff. And they do a lot of, this is a research centre. It was founded from the start as a research centre in the field, so using the traditional ayahuasca methods of the Shipibo peoples, which is darkness, often complete darkness, singing, traditional singing, lots of tobacco smoke. You familiar with this, agua florida? This is I'll maybe demonstrate that later, a very strong smelling floral scent. Various shamanic tools that they will use, music being the main one, I would say. There'll be no surprise to you, I'm sure. But music, but also smokes, sople, so the kind of spitting over the people, wafting things, rattles, etc., all part of the shamanic experience. So I'll try and show this here. You sit in on mattresses around a central thing, and the shaman's there. And then you drink a small cup, normally 50 to 100 millilitres of ayahuasca. I'm sure you all know that ayahuasca is pharmacologically, it's DMT with a MAOI combined. So it's the chacruna, the leaves of the chacruna plant, and the smashed up vine of the smashed up bark and vine of ayahuasca. So this is a piece of ayahuasca that I picked up at the market in Peru, in Belen Market in Iquitos, and you would take a piece of this if you were a shaman, and you would smash it up and you would sing songs into it, and you would prepare it over many, many hours in a traditional way. You combine it with chacruna leaves, and then that makes the DMT bioactive, crosses the blood-brain barrier. And then you'll have an ayahuasca experience which lasts 4 to 6 hours. So that's what I'm researching. I wanted to set out to research what happens on ayahuasca and what difference does it make. Will this work? Let's see. I set this up to try and give you a sense of, I'm sure many, if not all of you, already have your own psychedelic experiences, but maybe this will just set up something of the flavour of what... we're not going to get music, are we? So what I'm trying to show here is the intensity of the colours. This is only one part of an ayahuasca experience. It tends to come in waves. It tends that rise and then fall. It tends to have intense moments and then less intense moments. But particularly for me, at least in my subjective experience, the constant morphing, the constant relentless moving and morphing of shapes, and that lots of eyes, lots of faces, the shapes with this kind of this kind of sacred geometry, the sense of tunnels, of moving from one place to another, of going through what Huxley might call the veil, and animals and sacred objects, things like that look like Ganesha there. One of my participants said, ayahuasca is one of the hardest things I've ever done. She said, I didn't know that it would be a lot of screaming and yelling and processing it in a physical form. I thought it'd be like just something that you're uncomfortable with, like a dream maybe, yet you internally process it. I didn't know it'd be a physical thing. So I included that quote just to show that ayahuasca is such a intense, it's not primarily even mental or cognitive, it's a full body, lots of vomiting, lots of going to the toilet, lots of sweating, I was next to a participant once that was sneezing a lot, like sneezing 30 times a minute for several minutes at several points during the ceremony. But ayahuasca is, I know that you're researching psilocybin and DMT and 5-MeO. Ayahuasca is I think, in many ways at the bottom at the end of the list, because it's so difficult to get hold of in a way that makes sense to Western science. The experiences are generally ineffable, as in they're impossible to capture or communicate. So how do we study them? How do we study ayahuasca experiences rigorously and even scientifically? Well, that's where I think interpretive phenomenological analysis comes in. So interpretive phenomenological analysis is a qualitative, experiential research methodology. Oh, I feel like I'm motoring. Is there any questions so far? Anybody want to know anything more about any aspects? Okay. So IPA is a methodology created by Jonathan Smith and others. It's covered in a key text. If you're interested in this, I'll show you that at the end. And it's founded on 3 principles. One is hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the practice of the evidenced interpretation of human expression. Phenomenology is a close examination of first-hand experience through fresh, inquisitive eyes. It includes body perceptions, experiences of temporality of before, past, of present, and ideas about future. It includes intersubjectivity. It's a relational idea. But mainly it's the direct experience of real people in the real world. So that may sound like I'm not saying very much at all. You may think, well, all researchers look at those things. I'd say yes and no. And I can say more about it if you're interested. But phenomenology is a very particular way of doing that. It's really a practice. It's not just it's a philosophical idea that comes from Husserl and Heidegger in the 18th and 19th centuries following Kant. But it's then, particularly in IPA, it's operationalized. And what we do is put these two together, interpretive phenomenology. So the I and P of IPA, interpretive phenomenology. That means that if I'm to understand someone else's experience, I'm not them. I can't, you have different approaches to this, maybe brain scans, maybe these questionnaires. These are all attempts to get inside someone's experience. The way IPA does it is generally via interviews, but it's artifacts of human expression, in my case, oral interviews. And the third principle of IPA is that it's ideographic, which, straight away, the main consequence of that is that it limits scale. What do I mean by ideography? I mean individuals. These are individual stories. So IPA doesn't deal with disconnected data points. It certainly wouldn't have 1,000 participants or even 100 participants. I've got 8, and for a PhD, that's about right. I'm doing 3 time points. Other IPAs might just have 3. And the reason for that is that it takes absolutely ages, as I was saying to some of these guys, it takes absolutely ages to analyze this stuff. For me to analyze 1 hour of interview, okay, I'm working part-time, but it would take me typically a month. And I've got 3 of those interviews for each of the participants. So it's a very detailed exploration that we work in. Interpretive phenomenological. Those are the principles. I'll try and show you how that translates in practice. But basically what we're working towards is taking a deep dive into people and their own meaning making, their own words, their own vocabulary. So the questions we use in IPA tend to be free from abstract concepts. In psychedelics, you might have an idea of nature connectedness, for instance. So let's explore nature connectedness. You might analyze people's responses for that, but you would never ask someone, in IPA, you would never ask someone, what are your experiences of nature connectedness? You'd ask a much more open question, like, how is it being here in the jungle, or something like that, and then you would analyze the results. So, my study, semi-structured interviews as the method of data collection. I also did ethnographic aspects of keeping a field research diary. I interviewed 8 people, all the ones that opted into the study, and that was 8 out of the 10 people there. And mine is longitudinal IPA, which is 3 time points. Time point 1 was 6 months. No, time point 1 was a few weeks before the retreat, mainly about people's hopes and fears. Time point 2 was on retreat, so I was interviewing people usually a few hours after the experience. So it was the day after that we drank 5 times in 10 days in that retreat. So we were drinking every other night, and it was on the off day that I would interview people and find out what they were experiencing. And then time point 3 is 6 months later to see if what they thought would make a difference at time point 2 is what made a difference at time point 3, or if there were changes. So it's looking across time. That's a longitudinal IPA. Most IPA is kind of single point in time. And then I added ethnographic field observation aspects. And I also collected a sample of the ayahuasca. A lot of studies don't do this. And I sent it off for chromatography analysis. to see what the different levels of, because, you know, although I'm doing qualitative research and I'm interested in human experiences, I also wanted to, and part of why I'm here is because I don't want to just do that in isolation. I want there to be bridges between all these different ways of looking at things. And what it, you know, I'm saying this is a study of ayahuasca, but what do we mean by ayahuasca? It was important to me to know what was served, at least in pharmacological terms. I collected the sample from the shaman, and he said, well, you can take the liquid, but I'm the ayahuasca. You know, unless you take a sample of me, what are you analysing? You won't find it in there, he said as he handed me the sample. Because he said that he's the key that unlocks the door. So this is the tensions in the shamanic ways of talking about things versus the Western scientific way, which is what's the active ingredient in this thing. And my personal experience is very much that you drink the ayahuasca, you kind of sat there going, oh, something's up. This is weird. The kind of things are melting a little bit. Some things don't feel quite normal. And then the shaman would start singing, and instantly vision would flood, brain would be activated in a million different ways. And my experience was that the shaman's interventions were a key that unlocked the door that was ayahuasca. So it's not just chacruna leaves, ayahuasca vine alone, it's then the shaman. So IPA questions. Part of what I'm trying to do here is delineate IPA from what you might experience in other qualitative approaches. For instance, there might be an open text box on a survey, you might be familiar with that. But even thematic analysis of interviews you might be familiar with. IPA is still distinctive in some ways. It's more about personal experience. It's about what have you experienced. This is why time point 2 is quite important. What have you experienced in your ayahuasca journey? It's not what did your sister say or what did the person across the room tell you last night. What are your personal experiences? Not about opinions. It's what matters to the participant, not what matters to the researcher. So we tend to take a step back from any pre-existing models. And if they show themselves in the data, we'll then connect it in the discussion. But we're trying not to set people up to think of, like I said, nature connected as an example. So we try not to influence what the participants are saying and let them lead the way, let them tell us what's important to them. It's about the meaning, the impact of their experiences, not just their narratives, not just their descriptions. So an IPA question would ask, what difference did ayahuasca make to your life? Not necessarily the detail of exactly what they saw in their visions. And it's about life as lived in terms of their body, their experience of time, their relationships, not just cognitive ideas and concepts. Overall, the key tenet of phenomenology is back to the things themselves. I've been an apprentice for many years now in phenomenological interviewing. I'd rate myself maybe a 6 out of 10. And I've done quite a lot, and in fact, I've done thousands of hours as a psychotherapist, which I also work phenomenologically as a therapist, and I'd still only give myself 6 out of 10. My experience is that it's I don't know, you remember Michael Parkinson, or if you think of a good interviewer, whoever that is for you, Kirsty Walk, you know, it's a real embodied presence and skill that takes years to get right. What I've seen sometimes is putting a 20-year-old research assistant, you know, and giving them a bunch of questions and saying, right, just go on, ask those questions, get it on tape. This is about as far from that as you can get if it's going to work. Everybody can learn it, but it's a skill you develop over time. It's relational in that the person conducting the interview is generally the person doing the analysis. So because you're recalling everything that was happening in the room via the audio recording, not just analysing the transcript of the audio recording. You know, you might remember something. You might remember how, when I'm analysing the data, I might remember how I felt as the participants said that, and that's data to me. My feelings are data about them. So let's move on to my study and what I found. This is Klara. Klara is in her 40s. She's a child therapist. I've written here, what becomes of the brokenhearted? So that's an attempt to convey to you Klara's situation, why she started drinking ayahuasca in the first place. Klara used to be alcoholic. She was very much into alcohol and then very much into Alcoholics Anonymous, but found that AA meetings were somewhat superficial. They were somewhat limited. They were keeping her off the booze, but then what? She felt that she wasn't getting a substantial insights into herself, and then remembered about ayahuasca. So she says it here, this is my evidence for what I'm saying. I wanted more understanding of who I was and why. AA didn't give me the answers. I decided to revisit ayahuasca. By revisit ayahuasca, she means that she heard about it on the grapevine years ago and decided that maybe ayahuasca was something that could help her get more understanding of herself. On retreat, so this is more like the acute ayahuasca experience. I just lost all control of my body. My face was melting into the mattress. Sitting myself up to go, okay, I can sit up, I have a head, I know where I am. Her voice, which means the female singer, was like an angel. And then she starts seeing a vision. It was like me as a tiny girl, and I had to go towards it and just let my heart go. Whatever this was that I was clinging on to, just stop and let it out. And cried and cried and cried from my belly and rocked, and it felt really sad and like loss, but such a relief at the same time. So you can see here, there's a lot in that. That's just one paragraph of a 60-minute interview. But you can see there's religious imagery. Is this due to a Catholic upbringing? Perhaps she's British, as I've said. She goes back to being a tiny girl. So there's a real sense of returning to her past, returning to her traumas and re-experiencing them, which may connect to some of the ideas you're familiar with about, I've heard it called experiential avoidance, where people kind of know that they need to think something through, but at the same time avoid thinking it through because it's too painful. Ayahuasca kind of puts your feet to the fire, let's say. She had to go towards it. So the singing, where's that? Her voice was like an angel. So the singing, as I mentioned before, pulls her. She feels like she's being pulled to move towards herself as a little girl and let her heart go. So there's something she's holding on to. And Ayahuasca's encouraging her to let go. And when she does that, there's this release. It's cried and cried and cried, right? So in IPA, that's notable. When I'm transcribing, I don't just go and cried. You keep her exact words and cried and cried and cried because she's underlining it 3 times, and that's important. That's how much she cried. She cried a lot, and she cried from her belly. So it's a really embodied experience. It's not up here. It's not. I'm thinking about something sad. Really, really low. And she's rocking backwards and forwards. She's rocking. What does that? If you imagine that, rocking backwards and forwards, like I want to say, like in a psychiatric hospital. That's the imagery she's alluding to, and it felt really sad and like loss. So she's lost something that she's let go of, but then there's relief. So there's a catharsis to this experience. You can see this is a lot, isn't it? Right? It's a lot to experience. It's a lot for her to say, and it's a lot for us as researchers to work out. Okay, Klara. That happens. You can probably read accounts like that on Reddit all day long, right? My question then is, well, what difference does it make, right? So I come back 6 months later, and she says, I struggled to find a short quote that summed it up, but basically she said, I feel ready now after the retreat to start concentrating properly on life, build my life back up properly here at home, right? So something shifted. It's not massively obvious to Klara what it is, but that experience has translated overall to a much more settled. She's not desperately searching for something anymore like she is here. She's desperately searching for some idea of herself. It's as if she's found it. She's found something, although it's also partial for Klara, and we'll see this for the participants. This isn't a fire and forget sort of experience. This isn't a one ayahuasca experience. We'll sort you out, bish, bash, bosh, off we go, rest of my life right into the sunset. For Klara particularly, this becomes a somewhat religious, I would say, practice. It becomes a practice that she pursues over years then. And overall, I captured that as Klara shifting from alcohol to ayahuasca. Let's move on to Jeanne. Jeanne's in her 60s. So across the participants, there's quite a range of ages, and there's a relatively even mix of gender, male and female. And there's a good mix of ages from 19 to 66 or so, right, in the participants that I had. And then there was a mix of UK and US, so demographically. I'd say that's a quite typical mix for these Western retreats that take place in the Amazon. So there's a kind of touristic element. They're designed for Westerners. They're not designed for everybody else. Generally cost $5,000 or so for a retreat. And so this is the mix of people that you get in real life. Jeanne is a pregnancy educator. She calls herself a crone. which is an elder woman, elder female woman that teaches younger female women, particularly about pregnancy. She teaches pregnancy yoga and things. And she said, before retreat, oh, there's a lot about my mum and why she was the way she was when we were children. What she means is she was very difficult. She had a really problematic relationship with mum. My relationship with my dad, I always felt like he didn't like me. So, really difficult relationship with mum and dad. Dad, she feels, actively disliked her. Not only didn't love her, but actively disliked her, even compared to her siblings. And that's why, and she's got this sense of something unresolved. And this is why, Jeanne said, I'll try anything once, which I think is common for someone looking to psychedelics. It's like she's got herself into a bit of a rut at home, and she wants to shift something. So ayahuasca, she operates in these circles where she might come across ayahuasca, and then she books this retreat through. On retreat, I was held in somebody's hand as a tiny baby. I wasn't visible. It didn't look like a baby. It just, for me, it was me as a baby, and my mum and dad giving me love. I think that's really interesting, that it shows how she's interpreting her experience. She's not just saying, I saw myself as a baby, like people I think assume about psychedelic experiences as if they're clear. I saw myself as a baby and my mum and dad gave me love. Right? That's not what I hear as an interviewer. What I hear is, I wasn't visible. What? So did you see something or did you not see something? It's kind of both. It didn't look like a baby, but it was. It's both not a baby and a baby at the same time. Go figure. But her meaning, what I said about IPA and the meaning making, she knows. And think about your dreams, right? You just know. So when I work with people as a psychotherapist, you just know what it's trying to tell you, even though you can't really pin down exactly what it is about it that tells you that. It was my mum and dad giving me love. Or at least that's how she's chosen to interpret whatever she was experiencing on the ayahuasca. So she held in somebody's hand as a tiny, and she says hand as well, not hands, hand. That's how small she is. She's a hand like this. Sometimes you see those photographs, don't you, that put their wall, the baby in a hand, baby this thing. But I wasn't visible. It didn't look like a baby. But for me, it was me as a baby, and my mum and dad gave me love. So again, like Klara, you can start to see how this is a deep dive into the people's individual experiences, but already, I've only shown you two, but there's connections you could make. Klara saw herself as a little girl, Jeanne sees herself as a tiny baby. Oh, something's happening here. 6 months later, I was able to recognise where my mum was coming from. And that's one of the things I've been working on since I came back, is my relationship with her, my mum. I can show her compassion. So it really shifted her relationship with her mum. Do you see the trajectory across these three? Difficult relationship with mum, very historical. I kind of, maybe they did give me love, maybe I'm just not remembering. And then in the third, appreciating mum despite her flaws. And it has made a real difference to her. Interestingly, I've not had space to show it here, but not at all with dad. Right? So part of what we do in IPA as well is look for themes and dissonance and differences. So I can't summarise from that ayahuasca helps your parental relationships, right? Because it helped with mum, but it didn't help with dad. So I also found with ayahuasca that there were little disappointments as well, which often people were reluctant to talk about, because they know I'm a researcher and they're taking ayahuasca and they think I want to hear pro-ayahuasca things. So there's a you might call it bias in there. So I was careful to ask questions that explicitly encourage people to tell me, but what are the shortcomings? What did you not get? What was the worst thing about this? To try and have a more rounded thing. Jeanne is seeking more confidence in herself and relationships, so that's why she's approaching ayahuasca. And broadly, she got it. Broadly, Jeanne got it. I'll just do one more, and then I'll move on to the themes. Here's Dane. We have time. We okay for time?
We are. Yeah.
How long have we got?
Well,
10 minutes left. Maybe I'll do 5 minutes and then we'll have a chat. Dane, in his 30s, he's an ex-Marine and a lost soul. Here he says, I've lost my meaning in life. I just lost what it's all about, what it's for, what life's for. Pretty high function alcoholism. So do you see another connection with Klara? Klara's alcoholic now, Dane's alcoholic. Jeanne wasn't alcoholic. On retreat, certain things were coming out. I could feel them shifting and getting pulled. So he's talking as if it's an exorcism, which is, I was next to him, it sounded like an exorcism. Some of them trying to hide and then just getting ripped out of me, and it's through no conscious acts of my own. It's just like throwing up and just roar, like a lion's roar, and just feel something physically leaving your body and mind. So he has a sense that something is being pulled out of him by the shaman, actually. What happens 3 months to 6 months later? All of my life's crutches, smoking, drinking, drugs, I've taken all that away. So at the start he says he's a functional alcoholic. At the end he says I've given up alcohol. The temptation is to go, oh great, Ayahuasca is good at getting rid of addictions. But then what he says next, so now it's just me and my problems. It's just me bearing it on full load. He's not happy about this. Dane is not happy about losing his crutches, right? He's felt like he has to move away from them. But now he has to face life without the crutches, just on his own. And he's really struggling. So he's struggling in a very different way 6 months later. And it's a bit counterintuitive. What we then do, I'll be very brief for this because of time, but what we then do is tabulate the data and then look for themes. So you can see I've rearranged what was vertical to horizontal here, T1, T2, T3. These are the key quotes. My mum, why she was the way she was, because me as a baby, and then I could recognize where my mum was coming from. For Klara, wanted more understanding, got some, and then things have improved. Dane, alcoholic, felt something was ripped out of him on retreat, and then he's kind of unsure how to exist without those things afterwards. This one I've thematized as personal development. This one as Ayahuasca improves key family and romantic relationships. If you looked at the fuller version, so the full version of that is this. This is actually only a 2-page table, but this is the more detailed kind of scholarly paper version of what I'm just showing you on one slide here. That would be amplified by the participants, and these might have some themes, etc. But basically in IPA, what we're working towards is what we call the longitudinal group experiential themes. So you do a deep dive into the personal and then scale back out to the group. Here are my findings. As I said at the start, this is the first time I'm sharing what might be the findings from my study. Ayahuasca helps key relationships and self-development. So I showed you some evidence for that. Improves some relationships, fails to improve others. Some use it for personal development. And it seems to offer clarity about work and purpose, I want to say, purposeful work. Ayahuasca offers structured practices over time for further work, so I mentioned that earlier. Klara, particularly, but all of them now feel like they're on a journey with Ayahuasca that is going to take place in a relationship with Ayahuasca, you might say, that takes place for many years. And they feel that's guided by a higher power, a sense of spirituality that's not particularly religious. And learning ceremony skills, they all talked about the development, even over the course of the retreat, of learning ceremony skills, that they were a bit green at the start of the first ceremony and felt much more competent by the end of the 5th ceremony in how to navigate, when to lean in, when to pull back, when to use water, when to ask for help, etc. So I'll stop there. That's a bit about IPA, that's a bit about what I've done with it and the results. So if you want to find out more, there's a key book, the second edition of Jonathan Smith's book. And I'm also associated with On Science, who are exploring the epigenetic neuroimaging physiological and psychological measures. So my research was in collaboration with Simon Ruffle and Weifang Tang at On particularly, who have at the same research centre, taken electrodes and hairnets into the jungle and are looking at more that side of things, combined with my quantitative research. Here's my contact details. Please feel free to, if we don't have time today, to send me an email. My website's got a news section. You'll see previous talks there. And that used to be Twitter until 5 days ago. So feel free to reach out to me on that. That's it. Open to your questions. Thank you very much.